Coming up on Network Africa. Ethiopia Army denies targeting civilians in Tigray airstrike. Several soldiers killed in Kenya helicopter crash. Plus, Southern African nations agree to deploy forces to Mozambique. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin in Ethiopia, where the army has denied that civilians were targeted or killed in the airstrike at Togoga village just outside Tigray's capital, Mekele. However, according to medics, at least 43 people were killed in the air raid on a busy market. The European Union and the United States have condemned the action.
At a hospital in Tigray's capital, Mekele, a 2-year-old girl is being treated for her injuries. Her mother says she and her father were injured in an airstrike on their town in the northern Ethiopian region. She says the bomb hit a market at about 1 p.m. on Tuesday in Togoga. Eyewitnesses and hospital sources said dozens might have been killed or injured in the airstrikes. The International Committee of the Red Cross says it helped evacuate those wounded. Amidst international condemnation, Ethiopia's military has defended Tuesday's airstrike, saying the attack targeted rebel fighters who had gathered to celebrate Martyrs' Day. Army spokesperson Colonel KENNETH denies that civilians were targeted or killed in the strike.
Our planes have eyes. They can identify who is civilian and who is combatant. It is the era of technology. It was a great success. Our heroic Air Force carried out a successful job. We targeted a force that was celebrating a Martyrs' Day.
The U.S. has called for an independent investigation and unhindered medical access to the victims. There have been growing calls for cessation of hostilities in the region, which the government has continued to reject. The Ethiopian military has been battling forces loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the region's former ruling party, since November. Fighting has displaced 2 million people, and the United Nations has warned of a possible famine.
Our focus right now initial focus has been on trying to get life-saving interventions. Some of the most critically wounded people, from what we gather, were evacuated by ambulances last night and this morning. We have requested access to the area to assess the situation and see how we can provide assistance. But so far, we've not been able to. The situation in the area remains very, very volatile.
The escalation of violence comes as Ethiopians voted this week in what Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has billed as the country's first attempt at free and fair elections. But the violence has underscored a messy reality in the country. Authorities could not hold polls on Monday in 4 of Ethiopia's 10 regions, according to the election board, due to the war in Tigray, violence and logistical problems. One of those regions, Sidama, voted late on Tuesday. There were no reports of major violence in parts of the country that did vote. The opposition has also alleged some irregularities, though on Wednesday, the African Union's election observer mission says the election and its processes have been overall conducted in an orderly, peaceful, and credible manner.
Elsewhere in East Africa, Kenya's military has confirmed the deaths of several soldiers after a military helicopter crashed during training outside Kenya's capital, Nairobi. According to a statement, injured soldiers have been airlifted to a military hospital in Nairobi. Now, it is unclear how many soldiers were on board the helicopter, but local media reports say 23. Aircraft accident investigators are at the crash site to establish the cause of the accident. Kenyan journalist Abby Agina joins us now from Nairobi for more on this. Thank you so much, Abby, for speaking to us. It's a really tragic situation we have, but details are still a bit sketchy, aren't they? What more can you tell us at this time?
Well, thank you for having me on the program. Indeed, it is a sad day for the Kenya Air Force, even as the news streamed in of a crash in west of Kenya, that is in Kajiado. And this was at a place known as Oltepesi. The reports that we have been able to gather so far indicate that 10 soldiers have died. They succumbed after the crash. And we do understand that the aircraft investigations unit are still on the ground trying to piece the puzzle together to understand really what would have led to the air crash. We do know that the ill-fated plane had, according to eyewitnesses, they did say that the aircraft circled in the air for about 20 minutes before it crash landed. We also understand that some of the other officers were on board. A few of them were able to manage to jump out to safety. That's the much we have as of now.
All right, now there are reports that some soldiers, have been taken to the hospital for treatment. Any update on their condition?
Well, what we can clearly confirm is that for those that were still alive, they were brought into Nairobi and they're currently receiving treatment at the memorial hospital that is run by the military. And according to the spokesperson from the military, they are still being closely managed and being monitored, even as they continue to receive medication, and some are also having blunt wounds. And it's still a developing story from this end, but that's pretty much what we can confidently report on as of this hour.
All right, and has there been any reaction, comment or statement from, any government authority or even the citizens? This is quite a tragic situation.
Yes, indeed. It did cause a big outcry in the country, especially for the families of the fallen soldiers. It is coming just a few months after another ill-fated plane crash that was reported here in the country. Clearly, the Civil Aviation Authority has been literally trying to ensure that the air safety is enhanced. And of course, majority of the crashes that we've had reports of, most of them have been commercial aircraft. This being a military aircraft, it comes in as a surprise because it also beholds that in the military, we expect high level of efficiency, high level of maintenance of all the aircraft. A lot of questions being raised. How could it be that such an incident would happen in a military aircraft? Well, of course, the investigators and of course the Deputy Regional County Commissioner of Kajiado County, that is in the west side of Nairobi, confirmed that the military have been flying that region, that is Oltepesi, for a while. They have been conducting their trainings in that neighborhood, and they've never witnessed such an accident. This is the first of its kind, and it has left many tongues wagging.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Abby Agina, Kenyan journalist. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has appointed General Wilson Mbadi as the country's new army commander. He was promoted from deputy army commander and was also at one point the president's personal bodyguard. General Peter Elwelu, who has been the commander of land forces, will now be his deputy. The general is infamous for having been in command when the military stormed the palace of the king of the Zwenzururu in western Uganda in 2016, during which over 80 people died. The president's son, General Muhoozi, will now be overseeing the land forces. Still in East Africa, let's check in on the situation in Mozambique, where reports say Islamist insurgents have been involved in renewed clashes near the northern town of Palma. The report comes as southern African countries approve the deployment of a standby force to help Mozambique fight the insurgents. The northern province of Cabo Delgado has long experienced instability, but the insurgency involving Islamist militants began in 2017. Thousands have died and almost 800,000 people have been displaced. The fighting has also brought a $20 billion natural gas project led by oil giant Total to a grinding halt.
The committee endorsed the recommendations of the report of the chairperson of the Organ on Policy, Defense and Security Cooperation and approved the mandate for the SADC standby force mission to the Republic of Mozambique to be deployed in support of Mozambique to combat terrorism and the acts of violent extremism in Cabo Delgado.
United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called for efforts to build on progress already achieved in Libya, urging foreign forces and mercenaries to withdraw from the country. In a video message to the Second Berlin Conference on Libya, he stressed the importance of the full implementation of the October 2020 ceasefire agreement, the holding of elections on December 24, 2021, national reconciliation, and the respect for human rights.
The initial group, full implementation of the ceasefire agreement is of paramount importance to consolidate peace in Libya. I commend the 5+5 Joint Military Commission for working together towards this end, and I'm encouraged by the continued investment in confidence-building measures by both sides. The United Nations is committed to supporting the Libyan ceasefire monitoring mechanism. The initial group of UN ceasefire monitors will be deployed to Tripoli soon. We must put an end to all foreign interference, including the full withdrawal of all foreign forces and mercenaries from Libya. I urge Libyan and external parties to agree on a comprehensive plan with clear timelines to achieve this goal, which UNSMIL stands ready to support. Security for ordinary Libyans will greatly contribute to further progress on the political track. Building confidence and trust is key. I welcome the progress achieved on the political track, in particular the endorsement of the Government of National Unity, including a number of women in key ministerial positions, and the Presidency Council in March this year. I congratulate the Libyan authorities on the peaceful transition of power, a testament to the political will to move forward. I'm also encouraged by the formulation of key priorities aimed at improving living conditions for all Libyans, and I urge the Prime Minister and his cabinet to make good on their pledges. National elections should be a time for unity. All Libyans, including women, youth and internally displaced people, should be able to participate freely in the elections on 24 December as candidates and as voters. Incitement to violence, harassment or hate speech should have no place in the electoral process.
And speaking of peace processes, South Sudan's government, with the support of the United Nations mission in the country, has organized a workshop to consult IDPs on the constitution-making process, which is a key component of the country's revitalized peace agreement. After independence in 2011, South Sudan has been governed under the Transitional Constitution of South Sudan. The workshop, one of many planned, represents a distinct departure from previous constitution-making processes in the country, which were run by political elites and legal experts with little or no public participation.
A constitution should reflect judicial justice reform, because our judges should not judge South Sudanese nationals based on selective justice. We urge the government to prioritize the civil-military relations in the constitution-making process.
The constitution-making process is the fundamental consideration of sovereignty and should be an inclusive process where all voices are heard, including yours. The constitution-making process itself is a key element of the peace agreement. Chapter 6 outlines the process, which is expected to pave the way for elections at the end of the transitional period. Public participation in these processes is premised on the idea that democratic constitutions should be created and adopted through democratic processes and not in small, closed rooms by scholars and elites alone. Therefore, efforts like this to ensure the participation of IDPs and refugees is essential to fully realise their rights as citizens of South Sudan and overcome barriers to their participation in meaningful discourse and inclusion in public life.
Still ahead on the program. Senegal's famed jazz festival returns after COVID-19 pandemic postponement. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Former Cote d'Ivoire Prime Minister Guillaume Soro has rejected a verdict that sent him to prison for life. He says the aim of the trial had been to put an end to his political ambitions. According to him, the trial showed how the Ivorian judiciary could easily be manipulated by the executive branch of government. However, he has vowed to continue with his fight against the capture of the Ivorian state and the control of all its institutions. The sentence, which was passed by the criminal court in the capital Abidjan on Wednesday, sentenced Mr. Soro in absentia as he has been living in exile for the last 2 years. He and others faced charges of conspiracy and undermining national security by plotting a coup. Mr. Soro was banned from running for president in last year's election over a previous conviction in absentia for money laundering. Some updates from the COVID-19 pandemic. Namibia has recorded its highest ever daily increase in COVID-19 deaths. On Wednesday, the country's health ministry announced 45 deaths, which represents one of the worst current death rates in the continent, given Namibia's small population of 2.5 million. The ministry also confirmed that over 1,500 people had tested positive for COVID-19 from among 3,725 people who had been tested the previous day, representing a 42% positivity ratio. Health Minister Kalumbi Shangula urges patients to visit health facilities as early as possible for medical assistance, saying late health-seeking behavior leads to high mortality. The country has so far recorded 77,303 cases of COVID-19 and 1,224 related deaths. Over in South Africa, 282,000 teaching and non-teaching staff at a South African school have begun receiving their COVID-19 vaccination. The process began after months of debate and disruptions in the school calendar in some parts of the country. Channels Television was at the flag-off of the vaccination process at the Rabasoto Community Hall in Tembisa, Johannesburg.
As promised during a weekend briefing, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is getting into the arms of those in the education sector.
I am elated, I am encouraged, and I am hopeful that indeed what we committed as the education sector, because we're the ones who put the timelines, to say we need 2 weeks because we don't want to disrupt schooling, and when we close on the 8th, we want to be done. So that when we come back in the next term, we're done with vaccination. And that's why we put ourselves under so much pressure.
We are very pleased that after all the battling, we are able to assist the education sector in making sure that we can provide the vaccines. And we want to thank them for the very good way in which they've organized.
With the school calendars interrupted several times and COVID casualties recorded in schools across the country, government has been criticized for not regarding the workers in education as frontline workers much earlier.
The regret part of it is that we've lost a lot of time in the education sector. That if we had this earlier, we would have recovered and protected the future of our children. We can't risk to have a generation that miss school. We can't risk to have a full generation that will not be given the necessary support that they need. The experts have indicated that the closure and opening of schools since last year, we've lost almost between 3 to 5 years of schooling. So it's very important that we recover that lost time.
There have also been calls for a boycott of the vaccine process, but the department has promptly tried to calm anxiety, and these teachers are calling on their colleagues to get their shots as well.
I'm encouraging all the teachers in the country to follow suit because it's for the safety of their health, but also it's also for the safety of the children that they will be teaching in school.
Well, I will encourage everyone to take a vaccine for the sake of yourself and your family, because you don't know how strong is your immune system, how will it respond if you happen to be infected with this COVID virus.
Look, this process is starting to normalize the education system. We are saying if all educators take this advantage and take the jab, then we know that we're going to be normalizing because we won't be disrupted. And we want to call upon the communities not to disrupt our classes because the process is now going ahead, we are teaching.
Barring any hitches, the vaccination process for teaching and non-teaching staff across the country is expected to be concluded in 14 days. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
Leaders from across the world continue to pay tribute to Kenneth Kaunda, Zambia's founding president and Pan-African visionary. At the Zambian High Commission in Abuja, Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Oyema, signed a condolence register on behalf of President Muhammadu Buhari. Dr. Kaunda died on June 17 at the age of 97. He led his country from independence in 1964 to 1999. He will be buried at the presidential burial site in the capital of Zambia, Lusaka, on July the 7th. Well, a jazz festival billed as the biggest in Africa was cancelled last year due to the global health crisis. This year, it's back to the relief of performers and fans. For French-Senegalese blues singer Awali, it's good to be back. Let me love you. Just let me.
On a small island where Senegal River meets the sea, hundreds of mask-wearing jazz enthusiasts listen to French-Senegalese vocalist Awali sing the blues for uncertain times. Last year, COVID-19 halted St. Louis Jazz Festival for the first time in its 29-year history. This year, it was back, bringing much-needed life to the island of St. Louis, a UNESCO World Heritage Site famed for its colonial architecture and pastel-colored houses. African rhythms, funk, gospel, blues could be heard along the narrow streets last weekend, emanating from restaurants, bars, and hotels in the early morning.
Grateful that we made it, that we had the opportunity to do it. You know, like last year there was no festival at all, so really it's a big event, and you could feel that people were so happy to be there.
But Louis, as northern Senegal, was spared the deadliest impacts of COVID-19. But a decline in tourism and an economic crunch have left residents hungry for a boost that only its largest annual events could provide.
The festival not taking place last year was an economic disaster for St. Louis, because during the festival period, a lot of people came. There were a lot of tourists coming and going, and there are a lot of businesses that benefit and live off this festival. Hotels are always full during the festival period. It's not like today. Normally it's full. There were a lot of people. It was a big economic blow. I understand why this year, despite the crisis, the festival was held. Because if it was not, it would have been a very important blow for the city.
Billed as Africa's biggest jazz festival, it has struggled with dwindling attendance since its days of hosting headliners like American pianist Herbie Hancock, who played there in 1996.
And that's it on the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.